The UMI X2 had a 5-inch screen. It's only 8.9mm thin. On the top is a 1.5mm headphone jack, on the downside is a micro USB connection, with a volume rocker and an on-off switch on the right side and a 13-megapixel camera on its back. With a beautiful 1920 by 1080 Full HD screen, which is pretty amazing. The phone is powered by a 1.2 GHz quad-core processor and the Power VR SGX 544 GPU. We have 2 GB of RAM and 32 GB of ROM. The front-facing camera is 2 megapixels and, like I said before, a main camera with 13 megapixels. The battery is 2500 mAh. Before I go on and praise this phone over the skies, I want to show you the flaws I've got with my phone. Flaw number 1. The hardware keys aren't illuminated correctly. It's not too bad, but it's definitely not supposed to be that way. Flaw number 2. My vibration motor isn't working correctly. It's just loud and doesn't vibrate at all. The biggest flaw is this tiny too bright pixel. It doesn't seem too bad, but once you found it, you'll see it every time. That's making me crazy. So now let's put those issues away and review the phone the way it's supposed to be. First up, build quality. It doesn't only look good, the quality of the device is really good too. It doesn't feel cheap at all, it's pretty heavy, got a solid glass front. The design is simple and reminds me a little bit of the Samsung Galaxy Note, and the overall finish is nicely done. The back cover fits perfectly, but it's still easy to remove. The volume rocker and the on-off button is from good quality too. Just the USB port is a little bit too shaky in my opinion. Next stop, the display. First time you turn it on, you will very likely be stunned of its sharpness, clarity and vividness. Best thing, it keeps this awesome quality at all angles. Keeping in mind the high pixel density the light has to shine through, the brightness is pretty good too. So now let's have a quick look at the benchmarks. 11,841 points in N22. 3,266 in quadrant. 28.1 frames in Minimark 2, and Velamo did 1,389 in HTML and 474 in Metal. Please keep in mind that the UMI X2 has to push a 1080p Full HD display, and also that the results and benchmarks may vary from time to time. 5-inch screen and 1080p display should be perfect for browsing the internet. Let's test it. Even on huge sites like The Verge, the UMI X2 can scroll smoothly. Pinch to zoom also works quick and very accurate. With the right browser like Boat, you can even watch Flash videos. Here's South Park in 1080p. So now let's have a look to the camera quality. So here you see a 1080p video sample with original sound. As you may recognize, the colors are pretty reddish and it's a little bit blurry when I'm moving the camera. Here I'm filming my Sony Alpha 57. As you can see, I'm using a macro mode. The autofocus is working quite nice and the picture quality is better than the picture quality was outside. 13 megapixels sounds a lot, but as we all know, megapixels aren't everything. The optics are much more important. The comparison to the Sony Alpha 57 is just to have a reference image. So, last but not least, let's get to gaming before I'm starting to sleep on my microphone. This little game is called Hungry Shark Evolution, and it's one of my favorites. Even so it uses a 3D engine, it's more of a 2D game. I've played it a lot on my Nexus 10, and my Nexus 10 is overheating pretty quickly on this game. The UMI X2 does it without getting even a little warm. That's a good sign. I randomly picked one new game from the market, and this is a Fast and the Furious, and it plays Fast and Furious pretty smooth and good. One of the best looking and one of the best racing games on Android is Real Racing 3, and it works quite okay on the UMI X2. Could have a little bit more frames, but it's absolutely playable. At least if you don't suck at one-handed driving. So let's get to the verdict and a few things I forget to tell you. First up, the GPS of the UMI X2 is working. Even in Europe, you only have to configure it a little bit. All these standard Google apps are working like a charm. Here, for example, is Google Earth. And for daily use, the phone is more than fast enough, even with 1080p. You might not be able to play the very newest games for the next 2 years in full HD, at least not with decent frame rates, but the most and the best games are working right now. And if it's not your main goal to have a gaming device, you should be pretty okay with the performance of the UMI X2. As you have seen, the build quality, the screen, everything is really okay, but you have to get a working UMI X2 and not a faulty device like I've got. So I can't really recommend to buy one. If it would work, it would be perfect. Mine is just not.